ITS architecture. This kind of came about, the genesis of this presentation. We were working on the update of the statewide ITS architecture, and we met with Becky at the time, and we kind of wanted to bring to her attention that we need to be looking at these ITS projects involving transit and making sure we are following the federal guidelines for these projects. So that's kind of part of the process we'll go through today. And we've been trying to set up this presentation for a while, and unfortunately, it seems like something always comes up. But again, I'm glad for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Just a quick outline of our short presentation. I'll give a very brief overview of what intelligent transportation systems are and what the ITS architecture is. And I'll touch on that federal requirement for ITS projects. They have a requirement to be treated kind of in a special way that we will look at. And then I'll show kind of a collection of different transit ITS services that are available in the architecture. And then briefly go over the North Dakota DOT ITS project checklist. This is the form that Becky mentioned at the beginning that kind of needs to go with different transit technologies that are being deployed by you folks. And then I provided some resources if you need more information, and there are some links in that slide as well. So by way of definition, when we talk about intelligent transportation systems, or ITS for short, we're really talking about utilizing computing and communications technologies in order to monitor different portions of your system with the aim of making it more efficient and safer. This is just kind of a diagram that shows an overview of that process of monitoring, gathering different pieces of data and information, bringing it back to a center, and then using that information to proactively manage different systems. So as you can see, ITS touches really a bunch of different areas, including maintenance. You see like a snowplow there. Plays a role in emergency management and emergency response. Various devices on the roadways, such as traffic signals, dynamic message boards that display messages to travelers, any sorts of surveillance we do on the roadway, data collection through different devices. And also, as you can see, represented by that pretty old-fashioned bus there, it deals with transit as well. So a couple of examples just to kind of make sure we are on the same page here when we're talking about transit technologies in ITS. We're talking about things such as transit vehicle tracking, commonly known as AVL, or automated vehicle location. We're talking about having technologies for transit security, such as having cameras on board of the buses, maybe some different systems that monitor the acceleration, hard braking, things of that nature. And then any software and systems that can be both on board the buses, but also at your transit centers that would aid in the fixed route and demand response transit operations for the different agencies. So some of these things could be computer-aided dispatch, utilizing a geographical information system for your maps, for routes, for those who especially run fixed route operations, providing traveler information to your riders. A lot of the software systems now that come with the vehicle tracking, they have the facility to have rider information available, including, for example, bus arrival time and things of that nature. And then, most agencies would have some sort of web presence where they can display fare information, route information, service disruptions, things of that nature. I'm not sure how many agencies would have electronic fare boxes. Probably the larger agencies would have that. But again, that's another thing that could aid in the operations of demand response and fixed transit operations. One distinction to make is that when we're talking about transit technologies, like if you get a new phone system, for example, in your offices or some new PCs, that does not qualify as an ITS that needs that checklist filled. If you get a software to run on those PCs that help you with the, for example, a computer-aided dispatch software, then that would qualify as an ITS project. So I just wanted to make that distinction there. So when we talk about the ITS architecture, it's really our planning document for the deployment of various ITS technologies in a region. There are a bunch of things that need to be defined in the architecture in order for it to be valid. We need to specify which functions we're going to be performing. These functions we refer to as ITS services. So, for example, like we mentioned, the vehicle tracking would be one of those functions or services, etc. Security is another one. And we will look at some of these services from the national architecture in a minute here. And then you need to identify your subsystems where these functions take place. So there are various types of subsystems in the architecture. They could be a center, like your transit centers. It could be devices, like anything you would install on board a vehicle, or the vehicle itself that is instrumented. All of these are referred to as subsystems in the architecture. And then these subsystems, they need to interact. There needs to be some information that would flow in between them in order to perform these ITS services and functions. So an example of this would be the vehicle sending back its current location to the transit center. And then for these information flows to happen, we need to have communications in place. So we specify how these interactions are communicated. So more than likely, there'll be some sort of cell modem, for example, on board of the vehicle, or it could be two-way radio communications for just some dispatch between an operator and the vehicle driver or the bus driver. And then we identify our stakeholders and what their roles and responsibilities are in the architecture in order to perform the various services. So we have the national architecture that's put out by the Federal Highway Administration, and that's a template that we use to develop regional architectures. The national architecture has the full scope of services in many different areas. And what we do in the regional architecture is a customization process where we pick the services that fit the regional needs. And we also do some customization on the services in particular in terms of which information flows are relevant to our region. So that's the process or the distinction between the national architecture and the regional architecture. Now, getting to that federal conformity rule, which is, I think, the reason why we're doing this presentation today. This came out in the early 2000s from Federal Highway. It specified that any ITS project shall conform to the national ITS architecture and standards. And what that entails is, first of all, that you need to have a regional architecture that was developed based on the national architecture. And that was the major effort to do, and that's something that several MPOs and the North Dakota DOT did in the early 2000s again. The first version, I believe, was 2004, 2005. And these architectures have been updated since several times. So the second requirement is that any ITS projects that are deployed in the region after you've developed your regional architecture should conform to that architecture or comply with the architecture. And what that means is that if you're deploying any services, like we kind of went over them briefly, that service needs to be identified in the regional architecture. And then the last piece is that the deployment of ITS projects need to follow a systems engineering analysis. And that's just kind of a systemic way of studying your requirements, understanding your needs before you go ahead and procure a technology system. And the reason why the feds came up with this and made it a requirement is that kind of in the early days of ITS, there were a lot of failed deployments, unfortunately, just because of lack of planning. Technology projects, they have complexities that are different from what what we're typically used to, especially when we're talking about other areas than transit, such as construction, etc. Some of the more activities that transportation agencies are familiar with. So due to these complexities that are introduced by these new technologies, there was unfortunately a high level of failure in these projects. And this is back in the day where a lot of the larger transit agencies and transportation agencies were really developing a lot of these systems in-house. So they had their own programmers writing the dispatch software. They had their own, own method of doing vehicle tracking, etc. So it was a lot less commercial off the shelf at the time. And for that reason, Federal Highway wanted this systemic approach that we call the systems engineering analysis and process for deploying these ITS projects. So the thing to remember is that this federal conformity rule applies to all ITS projects that are federally funded. It specifically mentions the Highway Trust Fund that includes the mass transit account, as you know. So I always like to add this slide after I mention the federal conformity rule, kind of a stick and carrot approach, is that we want to follow this process. We want to have an architecture in place, not just to meet the federal requirements and the rule, but also because the architecture offers us a lot of benefits. So these are some of the benefits here. Having an up-to-date regional architecture in place helps us describe the ITS picture in a region where we know our stakeholders, we know what services are existing, what services we're interested in. The architecture also helps us have opportunities for integrating different systems. The architecture is also key for having systems that are interoperable, meaning that if you have pieces from different vendors, if they are following the standards that are specified in the architecture, the systems should be interoperable and should talk to each other. The architecture just helps us have better communication, be it between people, the different stakeholders that are involved, but also between the systems and the subsystems that make up the architecture. One benefit of the architecture is that it's technology independent and service focused. And that helps the architecture to be valid over a longer time horizon. As we all very familiar, technology changes very quickly. And so we're not really, concerned with the software that you use for your computer-aided dispatch, but we just want to cover that computer-aided dispatch service exists, that we have that assistance in the scheduling and the routing of the vehicle, etc. So we're not really concerned with which vendor is providing it, what technology they're using for providing it. And then finally, the architecture, like I mentioned in the beginning, is really a planning tool that helps us in the deployment of our ITS projects. And just going through the architecture, creating the regional architecture, updating the regional architecture, can satisfy a portion of that federally required systems engineering analysis. And I'll touch on that a little bit when we look at the ITS checklist form. Just kind of to dovetail into that planning piece, I wanted just to show a screen grab from the Grand Forks, East Grand Forks Regional ITS Architecture. This is the most up-to-date one that is published on the web. That website is in your resources slide. But I just wanted to show how we can look at planning factors that we gather from other planning efforts that the MPO has done. In this particular case, the source is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And then we specify how the regional architecture services can help us meet specific goals and objectives within our plans. So in this example, Objective 4 deals with transit ridership. The MPO is interested in increasing ridership on the fixed route system through improved information availability and service quality. So, these are different services, ITS services, that can help support this role or this goal, excuse me. These services being transit fixed route operation service and a transit traveler information service. This screen grab is from the national ITS architecture. Like I mentioned, the national architecture has all the possible services, and then we pick the ones that are relevant to our region. So as you can see in the public transportation or transit area, there are 18 service packages that are identified. And what we end up incorporating kind of depends on each region. Some of them, I'll say, they kind of fit more of a larger urban area kind of regions, such as, for example, PT14, multimodal coordination. This really deals with if your riders are riding different modes of transit, such as, from a train to a bus, something of that sort. So, typically, we don't include these services when we're talking about ITS architectures in North Dakota. This is the checklist. I will touch on it a little more. I'll show you the actual PDF file. So I'm just gonna. I think I'm missing a slide. Okay, I don't think I went over this slide, did I? So I just wanted to point out that we have 4 regional architectures in North Dakota. And again, that initial development of this happened around 2004, 2005. So all 3 MPOs ended up developing their own regional ITS architectures that cover the MPO boundary. And any of our transit providers today on this meeting that are within the boundaries of the MPO, that's where their relevant services and the architecture would be in these specific regional architectures. In addition to the 3 MPOs, the North Dakota DOT championed the development of a statewide ITS architecture. Now, the main focus of the statewide architecture is really state-level services. We're talking about things like providing traveler information on a state level. So if you're familiar with 511, for example, or the traveler information map on the DOT website where you can go and check road conditions, or the dynamic message boards you see on the highways displaying traveler information, things of that nature. So these are the kind of services we're focused on in the statewide architecture. But because we have a lot of rural transit providers, we wanted to make sure that we have transit services covered. So we'd like to say that the statewide architecture provides coverage for services that are not considered statewide or state-level services, but rather services performed by different local jurisdictions. So if you are outside of the 3 MPOs, you need to look at the statewide ITS architecture for your various ITS services in the transit area. Okay. So with that, let me pull the ITS checklist from the North Dakota DOT. Let me stop this and switch to my web here. Okay. So this is the checklist form from the North Dakota DOT. As you can see, it begins with just general information about your agency and the stakeholder and the project champion contact information. If it's a DOT project, it'll have a PCN and a project number, etc. And then if there's a relationship to other projects, this is where you point this out. So the portions of the checklist that I wanted to just show you today is that you can get information directly from the different regional architectures to go and fill a portion of the checklist. So when you're picking the area, this will be the area your project would be in, the public transportation. And then the service packages, this will depend on which of these services are you deploying, you know. So if you're, for example, installing a camera security system on your buses, the service would be transit security. If you're adding a dispatch software, it would be, depending on the service you provide, either the fixed route operation service or the demand response service, or what we call now dynamic transit service, etc. And then for each of these services, there are a number of elements. These are the different subsystems that we mentioned that would go in here. We have also links for the various architectures that your services would come from. So like I mentioned, if you are within an MPO boundary, you'll have that specific MPO architecture available. Otherwise, you'll be in the North Dakota statewide. I'd like to point out that I am going over this quickly. The purpose of this is just to make you aware that this checklist exists and is something that needs to be filled for your ITS projects. The part of our relationship with the DOT is that we have an agreement with them that we would help the agencies get the information that they need in order to fill these checklists. So you would fill the portion that has the project information, the costs, etc., and we would help you with the, you know, how do you get the different pieces of information from the architecture, or we could actually fill these portions for you, and I'll pull the diagrams and email them, etc. So you have help in this. The point again today is just to make you familiar that this is something that exists and it's something that needs to be addressed. Let's see anything else here. It's fairly straightforward, and the thing to keep in mind is that kind of the simpler projects take less information and less effort for this. We're probably not developing anything in-house from scratch. We're just going through either an RFP or other sort of procurement process where we're purchasing a commercial off-the-shelf product. So it really simplifies this process quite a bit. The other thing I wanted to show, while we do have the websites or my web browser up, this is the sites for the 4 regional ITS architectures in North Dakota. You could click on any of them and you go to that particular one. I'll go to Grand Forks again. So there's a report that goes with the architecture and a database that you don't really need to worry about. over 90% of the information in the report and the database is available on the web, easily accessible. So for example, this is where you can go and look at your services. We have them in different areas. If you look here, these will be the transit services in Grand Forks, for example. You can click on any of these and you can get more information with a description and then the diagram that shows the different subsystems in the service and what information flows are there for that particular service. I'll show this quickly. For outside the MPO, you would go to the state of North Dakota architecture. And again, if you look at the website and services, so you'll see a lot of kind of those state level services, but at the same time, there are, we included transit services. And if you click on these, you will see it a little differently where we're referring to local jurisdiction and local jurisdiction transit centers. It's a little bit of a generic description, but we wanted something that would cover all agencies in the state. So that's the North Dakota ones. And then on this website, and I have links to all these websites in that last slide, like I mentioned, so you don't have to worry about what the URLs are or anything. But this is the national architecture. So this is what Federal Highway puts out. And this is continually updated over time. And like this version 9.0 only came out last December. So it's fairly up to date. And then you can look at the service packages here. My mouse. There we go. So as I mentioned, this will have the full gamut of services under different areas. You can see commercial vehicle operations at the top, but if you scroll down, you'll get to public transportation. And these are the 18 services that I had in a screenshot in a previous slide. And then you can click on any of these and get more information on them. So similarly to what we had in the regional ones, you will have a description of the service, and then you'll have this flow diagram with the different subsystems and the information flows for each of the service if you'd like to get more information on that. I will point out again, like I mentioned, some services are more suited for larger urban areas, and also more services are suited to a kind of a newer area of ITS, what we refer to as connected vehicles. So some of these services, such as if you look at this PT13, vehicle turning right in front of a transit vehicle. So I have a slide on the connected vehicles, but I'll just kind of mention this service in the context of transit. This is assuming that we're going to have this interconnected environment where the vehicles, devices in the roadway, and the person's smartphone or other portable device are all interconnected, and they're all communicating information to, again, with the goal of improving that efficiency and the safety of the transportation system. So in this particular service, basically the vehicle will communicate with the bus to tell it that, hey, I'm turning right, kind of pay attention. And there are a couple of services within that realm here, such as a transit vehicle at station or at a station or a stop warning. And what this does is that when there's a transit vehicle approaching and it's about to make a stop, or even if it's going to leave the stop, it would broadcast that information to the neighboring vehicles there. So we're not quite there yet, but this is that area of connected vehicles. With that, I'll switch back to my slide. I just have a couple of slides to go over. Are you seeing my slides now, or is it still the website?
Still the website.
Stop sharing and share again. So this is the connected vehicle concept that I was talking about. Again, you have the vehicles, the infrastructure, and user personal information devices are all interconnected. They're all communicating. There's a pretty cool YouTube video here. If you're interested in kind of new transportation technologies, I encourage you to take a look at it. I'm gonna save you the time. It's about 5 minutes long. It's not too long, but we're not gonna do it here. So just to kind of bring it back, this was one of the first slides I had today where, we kind of had these centers that communicate with either field devices, different vehicles, etc. And we're kind of moving from this architecture towards this connected vehicle architecture where everything is talking to everything at the same time. And, that creates a lot of opportunities where you can reach riders directly, you can reach drivers and warn them of different situations. So the applications are really, they're really a vast area for potential safety improvements using this connected vehicle concept. That is, it's up and coming. It's the Federal Highway Administration is placing a lot of emphasis and a lot of resources towards connected vehicles. So it's the future, and it's coming. Again, just a few links to some of the things we touched on today, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. I wanted to include this slide in case you need my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me that way. But that's it for the presentation portion. And I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the presentation? Maybe if you have questions about if you have a project that you have coming up that you think may need this form?
So I have a question, Becky. This is Cindy in Fargo. And if anybody's wondering if any kind of a project they're purchasing or installing applies, then they can get in touch with Mohammed and find out, or work through you to get in touch with Mohammed to find out if this is necessary. Otherwise, how does it get flagged during the purchase or funding process in terms of that it needs to be documented in the ITS architecture?
Well, on our grant applications, on the 5339 grant application, there is a spot on there that asks if your project relates and if you've completed the form. Sometimes at that point, agencies say no because they haven't researched it to see that they need it. But from that, then we begin working with them to see if it is a requirement and connect them with Mohammed to get it completed. And in some cases it's not, but you as a small urban and maybe one of our other rurals has had to complete the form for some projects they've done, but relatively nobody else really has recently.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Before we get on to the next part of our meeting, I just want to remind anybody that just came on or hasn't put their name and agency in the chat box so that we can get a record of who's all attending today. And then I did just want to also say that this presentation meeting is being recorded. So privacy policy, I have to tell you that. So, and if you haven't seen it up in the upper corner there, we are recording this for those that cannot make it or have to leave early.
Now you tell me, Becky?
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. And all the agencies have your contact information, so they will definitely reach out with any questions we have. So thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yep, bye.
Okay, our next topic that we're going to be reviewing is the FTA drug and alcohol. And with us today is Linda D. Herrera. She is a senior drug and alcohol consultant with RLS and Associates, who is our contracted drug and alcohol consultants. Linda will probably have visited all of the rural agencies at least once, if not twice, doing compliance reviews and oversight. Unfortunately for us, Linda has chosen to slow down in her workload a little bit, and fortunately for her, but I want to publicly thank Linda for all she's done to make transit compliant and educate us on the FTA regulations. I know personally I'm going to miss Linda a lot, and thank you, Linda, and hey.
Hello, everybody. Darcy, your voice was going in and out. Can everybody hear me clear? Is it a clear presentation?
We can.
Okay.
Yes, Linda.
All right, good. Hi, everyone. I can see me, but I can't see any of you. I don't know if you can see me or not, but hello. It's been a while. I just have a few topics to talk to you about regarding the drug and alcohol regulations. The first one is, guess what topic we're talking about? COVID-19 guidance. ODAPC, the Office of the Drug and Alcohol Policy Compliance, has put out some guidance regarding testing during this time period. I don't know who has control of the slides. Do you want to go on to the next slide? I think it will be the guidance letter.
Actually, Linda, we sent those as attachments. They aren't in the
Okay.
slide presentation.
All right. No problem.
So, but if
No problem.
anyone wants to open them up, they were sent in the email as attachments.
Okay. So the first thing is ODAPC, as I said, Office of Drug and Alcohol Compliance, which is DOT, sent out a guidance letter talking about how to do drug and alcohol testing during the COVID-19. And so what they are saying is, if your collectors are not available, if your MRO is not available, then it's up to you as the agency to find somebody else so that you can try and do your testing during this time period. If you don't have a collector available, if your collector is saying, we've got COVID in the office, we're closing, we're not going to do any collections, then you need to do what you can to get your testing done. If you can't, then you document that. But it's very clear. The regulation states you cannot hire an employee until you have a negative drug result. So if you cannot get a pre-employment test done, you cannot allow that person to perform safety-sensitive functions. Also, if you're unable to do your training because you can't bring everybody to the training room, that's understandable. You can delay it until you can start bringing employees in, or you find another means of performing the training, such as having them watch online training from their home base or from an office with them alone, however you choose to do that. So you still should always try and get your testing done. If your collectors are not doing testing, find somebody who is. If you cannot find anybody, then you can delay the testing. As you know, if you have a random selection in a quarter and that quarter is over and you haven't got it done, then you have to stop trying to get that test done. Any questions on that? Oh, a quiet group. Okay. The other item in this, the COVID guidance that they have sent out is, as you know, a substance abuse professional must meet the donor. The regulations state if somebody has failed or refused a drug or alcohol test, you have to send them to an SAP before they can perform safety sensitive functions again. So in this guidance from ODAPSI, there's another letter stating during this time period only, and it's been extended to June 30th, 2021, that the SAP can meet the donor via video, as we are doing, because of the COVID-19. If they're going to change that rule, it will be changed after June 30th. But the SAP, the substance abuse professional, must have video training prior to doing that review with a donor who's tested positive or refused to test. So that is the information regarding testing during the COVID time. You need to try and do your testing. If your collectors are not, it's your responsibility to find another collection site that's willing to do it, and make sure that you can try and get your testing done, but don't hire anybody if you do not have a negative DOT pre-employment test. Okay, so that is the area on COVID that I just wanted to review with you. You should have those pages that they said they sent to you with an attachment. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is we're getting another custody and control form. Remember how fun that was the last time they changed out the form? There's a new form. You are required to use this custody and control form starting August 2021. This form went into effect already last August, but you can still use your old custody and control forms until August 2021. It went into effect August 2020. The difference of this custody and control form is there are other federal agencies that allow oral collections, but DOT does not. So we will not be doing any oral drug testing. We will still only perform urine drug test for DOT testing. But this form has been created so that both collections can be used on this form. So the difference of this form that you're going to see is that I don't know if all of you know, because not everybody here uses FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They are required when they do a urine test, a drug test for their employees, they have to use their CDL number, not Social Security, not employer ID number. So they've made a space for this on this custody and control form. It used to just say Social Security number or ID number. It now says Social Security number, ID number, or CDL state ID number on the top of the form. It's step 1. Also, they added other in the testing category, which again is in step 1 of that form. And you'll see that, it's so small here, but usually you'll see they'll check THC, where you were testing for the 5 drugs for marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, opioids, and PCP. Now there's another checkbox that says other. And that, again, is not for our DOT test, but it's used for other federal testing. And then on step 2 of this custody and control form, it looks like it's a little more legible there for you. It says a urine collection or an oral fluid collection. The collector needs to check off that box if they're doing an oral fluid collection or urine. And then another change on here is usually the donor will print their name, write their name, their birth date, the date of the test, and their phone number, evening or daytime phone number. There is now a space there for an email address for the MRO to use if they need to contact the donor who provided the collection. The last change on this custody and control form, all of you who have been on a review at a collection site with me, I always tell the collector you need to turn it over, and those are the steps you need to follow in that order of a collection. Well, they've removed that. There are no longer steps on the very back of the form. If you can scroll all the way down, and this will show the back of the form. And as you see, it's does not have the instructions on there any longer. It's been removed. So that is the changes that they have made on the custody and control forms. It is your responsibility to make sure that you have the most updated form prior to August 2021. So whoever provides your custody and control forms, they should know of this change, but please make sure that you get the most updated forms starting in August. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is CBD. I get so many questions on that. I just wanted to touch that topic a bit. DOT has put out a notice, and what the notice is saying is that they are testing for, they're not testing for CBD. They're testing for THC, which is the tetra, let me see if I can remember how to say that. I don't even have the word here on my form, I'm so sorry. But they're testing for the THC, which is the hallucinogen in the marijuana. And so some CBD products may have THC in them, which would test positive on a test. And you know, whenever we say what we're testing for, the 5 drugs, and I just said it a little bit ago, I said marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, PCP, and opioids. But what they're testing for is not the marijuana, it's the THC in the marijuana. So it's the same with CBD products. And so the notice that DOT has put out, and I will also download this notice into your global resources, just so you know that it's there if you want to read it. And what it's saying is the Food and Drug Administration does not certify levels of THC in any of the CBD products. So there is no federal oversight to ensure that the labels on the products are accurate. The CBD products are allowed to have less than 0.3% THC in them, but nobody is monitoring it to ensure that the products, that there's no THC in the product, or if the product is saying less than 0.3% THC, there's no federal agency monitoring that product to ensure that what's in there is less than that percentage. So when a DOT test is performed, if somebody does test positive for THC, saying that they used a CBD product is not an excuse. There's no reason to have tested positive for THC, no matter how it's consumed. And then the last item that I want to talk to you about is the, it's right here on your screen, the DOT Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy and Compliance, again, ODAPC. And there are 2 letters, and they are in your global resource on the Black Cat system also. One of them is discussing medical marijuana. I see in North Dakota, your state has approved medical marijuana. Again, as I stated earlier, if a person tests positive for THC, providing a medical marijuana card does not excuse the person from testing positive. It's still illegal with the federal government, and so a medical marijuana card will not excuse a safety-sensitive employee from testing positive for THC. There's also another letter That is on your global website. And it's a second letter from ODAPSI, and that is saying recreational marijuana may be approved by your state. But again, with the federal government, it's still illegal Schedule I drug, and therefore there is no legitimate reason why a person could test positive for THC when performing a DOT test. Do we have any questions on any of that? I just want you to know all of this information is available to you. The only thing I don't have on your global website is the CBD notice, and I will put that on there today once we finish this meeting. And MIS reporting. I have asked that all of you have your MIS reports completed by February 12th, which has passed. If you have not completed your MIS report, would you please get that done as soon as possible? And there are also some of you where I'm questioning. I'll send an email. My most popular question I have is when I see post-accident testing being reported, I'm emailing you to ensure that the testing has met the FTA post-accident testing thresholds. And to be honest, there's been 4 or 5 people that I've contacted, and they've ended up removing them from the MIS report because they should not have been a DOT test. Do we have any questions on any of that? Okay. Well, those are the things. Oh, standard operating procedures. I've revised those, the SOPs that I usually hand out to you or send to you electronically. Those, again, are also on your global resources. The forms are pretty similar to the forms that FTA has on their website. You're always welcome to go to the FTA website to get any form that is required to be used when doing any DOT testing. But I've also copied those and downloaded them in your resources also for your assistance if you need to use them. Any questions? Oh, what a quiet group. If you need to contact me, I think all of you have my email address. You should have my cell number also. It is, you can contact Darcy and she can send you my email if you've not been able to reach me. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Good luck on your retirement too.
I'm working on it.
Okay, so with no other questions for Linda, we'll move on in our presentation for today. The next area is just an update on COVID-19. The CARES Act money that we were awarded, just as a reminder, was $17.9 million, and that was awarded in April 2020. And spent to date is there about a little over 9.1 million is what we've spent to date. And that would go back into the January 2020 timeframe to present. Another recent relief fund that we have now is called Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, or they call it CRISA. So with that, that is just funding for our state for some 5310 funds. And what we received for 5310 was the rural portion got the $40,440, and the small urbans were $74,762. So right now we have not spent any of this to date because we have not awarded any of these funds to 5310 subrecipients. The DOT is currently working with the small urbans on how to disperse their funds. And again, these funds are 100%, just like the CARES Act. These are 100% funds. This CRISA funds, however, they do come with a few more rules. They really want them to be spent on operating. And if they are not spent on operating, then the transit agencies have to sign a waiver that would state that they have not furloughed any employees. And once they can sign that, then it would be up to our FTA Region 8 to approve this to be spent on capital items versus operating. Does anybody have any questions about those two funds, grants right now? Okay, and if you can't get on to, your mics aren't working or something, if you do have a question, please type it in the chat box because we are checking that to see if there's any questions in there.
Hello, everyone. This is Julie Small. I requested control here, but Becky, can you go back one screen? Didn't give me the control. Okay, as you're all aware, on January 29th, 2021, the CDC issued an order requiring that masks be worn by all travelers to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This does now basically affect all of our transit providers who are providing ground transportation. I put the links out there to the actual CDC order. And on January 31st, the TSA issued 3 security directives that support the enforcement of that CDC order mandating the masks. The link that I have there is the security directive that affects all of the ground transit providers. And on the third one, FTA master agreement has been amended to incorporate the CDC mask order. I'll explain that a little more later, but it is something that you should all look at and familiar yourself with, because the master agreement will need to be included in their all forthcoming documents in regard to that. Next screen. Okay, basically the information that I provided here is going over what the actual safety directive is giving us information on, and there are several actions that will need to be taken by the transit agencies to comply with this order. One of the #1 things is operators must notify passengers with prominent and adequate notice of the mask requirement. Make them aware of it. I did have a sample mask poster attached to this presentation, and that is one that they have out there, just letting everyone know that this is a federal requirement now. Therefore, oh, we lost the presentation here. There we go. That's just an example. You can put your own little symbol in the bottom, but it is now a federal law. Therefore, they just have a sample that you can post so that you can notify everyone that it now may result in any federal fines up to, and can result in denial of boarding or removal. And it is a violation of federal law. So this is just an example. You can feel free to modify it however you want. Another thing is operators must require that individuals wear masks. And this is any person traveling on transportation buses, any persons in the areas of transportation facilities for the purpose of purchasing tickets, in the waiting areas for the duration of travel, and that includes boarding and disembarking the buses. Next slide. Okay, another element is all operators must ensure that direct employees and contract employers wear a mask at all times in the buses and around transportation facilities. the requirement to wear a mask does not apply under a few exceptions. One of them is if you need to temporarily remove that mask to identifying or verification of identification while eating, drinking, taking medications, etc. However, prolonged periods are not permitted. They actually go so far as to say that the mask must be worn between bites and sips on transportation as well as within the transportation facilities. If you're communicating with a person who is deaf or hard of hearing and they need to have the ability to see your mouth to communicate, if the person is unconscious, incapacitated, unable to be awakened, or otherwise unable to remove the mask without assistance. There are some exceptions to this. Operator exemptions would be persons in private vehicles operated only for personal or non-commercial use, or a driver operating a bus who is the sole occupant of the vehicle. Those are the only exemptions for that particular exemption as far as the employees. Next screen. There are exemptions to the mask mandate for passengers. Again, we're all aware it's children under the age of 2. Persons who cannot safely wear a mask because of their disability as defined by ADA. This would include a person who has a disability who does not understand how to remove their mask due to a cognitive impairment. A person who cannot remove their own mask due to dexterity or mobility impairments, or a person who cannot communicate to ask someone else to remove their mask due to speech impairments or language disorders, because doing so would impede the function of any assistive devices or technology that they have. And additionally, the rule is not meant to cover persons for whom mask wearing may be just difficult. Some people like to fight it and not want to wear the mask. They would have to have a medical reason to have that exemption. Additionally, one of the other requirements of there is you as a transit agency can require additional information as long as you have established a policy and defined criteria for additional information, such as you can require a medical consultation from a third party, medical documentation from a licensed medical provider, or evidence that the person does not have COVID-19, such as a negative result from a test or a documented recovery. These would all be things that you would have to put into your policy that you would have to develop, and you would have to be sure that you're following that policy once it is established. The next item is procedures. Operators must establish procedures to manage situations with persons who refuse to comply with the mask mandate. At a minimum, the procedures must ensure that an individual who refuses to comply with an instruction given by the operator must deny boarding is one option, make best efforts to disembark the individual as soon as it's practical and for the operator's safety, or make the best efforts to remove the individual from the transportation facility when it is safe to do so. One of the things there's been a series of FTA mask mandate stakeholder calls, and one of the big concerns that across the nation is the fact that the safety of the operators and the people who are enforcing it. There is also some classes. I believe NTI has one to help train the operators on how to diffuse the situation and remove the person that's not complying safely. Another thing that this mask mandate did is if an individual refuses to comply with the mask mask requirement and is a significant security concern, the operator must report this to the Transportation Security Operations Center. And as you can see, I did provide the numbers for them to contact. And one thing that came out of our stakeholders meeting yesterday is they also have civil fines associated with this that can be placed on the person who's refusing to wear the masks. And the first offense is $250 to $500 for the first offense. Second offense goes from $500 to $1,500. So basically, they did put a little skin into it so that those fines would deter people from not complying with the mask mandates. Another thing that came about in there and is noted out at the CDC, face shields do not meet the CDC standard of an appropriate mask. They can be worn in additional to an approved mask as additional coverage, but a face shield is not an approved face covering, just to let you know that. FTA also has amended its master agreement to incorporate the requirement of the CDC mask order. This master agreement contains the standard terms and conditions that apply to every grant, every cooperative agreement, and loan authorized by the Federal Public Transportation Law or administered by FTA. And this amendment also includes the enforcement actions FTA can take due to non-compliance. So just to recap this a little bit, basically what's going to be required of our transit agencies is, one, they have to notify the passengers with prominent and adequate notice in your buses, in your facilities, on your website. If you have announcements included on your announcements, they want to get the word out. The FTA website does have some information out there on that. Second, they have to require all passengers to wear a mask unless they meet the established criteria for an exemption defined by your policy. Again, this goes back to your policy. You have to develop a policy, have it in place, and follow it. You must ensure that direct employees, contract employees wear masks at all times in the vehicle, in and around the transit facilities. So this pertains to employees as well as passengers. Also part of your policy, the fourth thing, you need to establish procedures on how to manage those situations for people who refuse to comply with the policy. And on a last note, this will also be something that we will monitor during compliance reviews to ensure that you're meeting all the requirements of the mask mandate, that you've established the necessary policies, and that you're following the policies that you established. Do any agencies out there, do you have any issues that you've had with the mask policy or anything you'd like to share in regard to the passengers or employees in regard to this mandate? Are there any questions on this information?
Certainly, Julie. I'm one that would like to have a few questions answered.
Okay.
I know you don't like to hear it. It's the same question I brought up to our FDA folks. Is what do you do with an individual that refuses to wear a mask and besides calling 911, delaying the trip, having all the rest of the passengers complaining, and you get them off the vehicle? And you ask them for their name to turn it in, and you get the word F and U. Now what do you do? Okay. So I've asked the question of how do you go about finding this individual?
To
have the haystack, if you ask me.
And were you able to get him off of the bus?
Well, certainly we call 911 and delay the route for a half hour waiting for the police to show up.
In the stakeholders call yesterday, they did state that if that's what you need to do and that's what your policy states, that's what you need to do and detain them.
But again, it goes back to asking the question on the fine. How are you going to find somebody when you haven't got a name or anything like that. They refuse to give a name.
You know, Dale, I think what I'm going to do is write your question down here. And they do have a chat line that they want us to put questions in when they're having these stakeholder calls.
Sure.
And I think I'll add that question to it to ask how we should be handling that or what our agencies can do.
Yep, that'll be the second one because I've already done mine.
Okay, sounds good.
You know what my response has been? Silence.
Well, we'll try again. How does that sound?
Certainly.
Okay. And Dale, if you just want to just shoot me that real quick in an email when we're done, the scenario, and then I'll take care of it from there and we'll get a second one in on that, okay?
Sure, we can do that.
And one of the questions that came in on the chat line, the riders that want to complain would like to call someone when I refuse service. What you can do with that is, again, it is federal law now, so they can complain and it's not going to fall under the normal types of complaint because it's a safety issue to prevent the spread of COVID, which is what this mask mandate was all about. So I would repost them, the signs, or make up new signs that are explaining that it is federal law now. You know, before we were told we were supposed to do it, protect everybody, do that. Well, now they put a little skin in the game. So that TSA number, if you have an extremely disgruntled employee, what they're telling us is to have you call the TSA number. But again, like Dale said, what if you don't have a name? For the smaller agencies, that's probably not going to be an issue, but on a fixed route, I can see where that would be an issue if you can't get the required information. And there was a good suggestion out there to provide them with a copy of the TSA letter. And that will define everything in there because everything that I had listed on this presentation is out in that safety directive. Again, it's the policies that you need to have in place and develop how you're going to handle those situations and how you're going to handle any exemptions. Again, under normal ADA regulations, you can't ask for the medical information to confirm a disability or anything like that. But in this case, you can ask for a third party as long as it's in your policy. So I recommend you all go out to the TSA website and actually look at that safety directive that was there because it does have pretty good information. There's some additional information that I probably didn't include in the slides. And again, as we have more information that comes out, on the call yesterday, there was some information also, a course on transit worker assaults to teach them effective mitigation measures. And that was, I believe, a course that was being offered by NTI. And the three things that they wanted to really stress away is try and keep the safety of the drivers. So inform, announce, try not to be confrontational if at all possible, and provide the notice and the information to the people, to your passengers. Any additional questions? Oh, I see there was another question out here from someone. So we have to turn down riders that refuse to wear them. What if they have a medical issue? That will go back to your policy. If you state all riders must unless they have applied for an exemption and have met the criteria, yes, you can turn them down if they don't comply with what your policy says. Any further questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. So for our transit grants, for our 5339B grant, that is a competitive grant where the DOT was awarded $15 million to spend on ADA vehicles. And these vehicles are to be funded with the 85-15% breakdown. To date, we contracted out just over $5.2 million on new vehicles. The DOT will put out future grants coming up, another one this year at some point, or combine it with the next grant cycle, which will be in November of 2021, and then on into the following year. And again, I do really want to encourage everybody to take a look at your inventory and also take advantage of the state aid that you have right now, because as I've mentioned before, that state aid, we will extend that state aid contract as long as it's going to match your vehicles, to replace new vehicles. In every effort to get all of our vehicles in a state of good repair, and this would be the best time to do it because we have the CARES Act money and you are still receiving state aid funds. So again, just want to really encourage everybody, look at your fleet, look at what you could be replacing, and then think about that in your next grant application. The next update is for our fiscal year 2022 grant apps and funding. We anticipate having the contracts out by late March. The applications are currently being reviewed. I just listed there all the funding that's currently available right now for 2022. The remaining CARES Act money is a little over 4.5 million. And then the remaining numbers there for 5311, 5310, and 5339. Those are the new funds that we have available that we just received, our apportionment funds. And then we are estimating state aid this year will be about the 4.1 million. And that of course is very much subject to change. We're hoping that it stays around that number, but we just don't know yet. And then just a side note that all the funds that you see up above, they do not include any turnback or unobligated older money.
Hi, everybody. With contracts and DocuSign, we've got some pros and some cons that people are liking or not liking with it, but we will be continued to use DocuSign for all the contracts. Now, the instructions for DocuSign for the agencies are located in Global Resources in Black Cat. The DocuSign takes the person directly to the place that needs to be completed and signed, so there's no worry about, am I missing a spot? Did I forget to do this? Did I forget to upload the attachment for the insurance? It will not let you save anything as long as there's something that's incompleted that's marked for you. Reminders for DocuSign. Ensure that the emails that you put in that are specified by the agency are correct. This will hang it up, and I won't notice it right away because it will stay at the agency level until all of a sudden it's brought to my attention that, what's going on with the contract? Did I, miss something? And then it can be off as so much as even one letter in the email and it won't go through. A person cannot sign both as the contractor or the contractor witness. They have to be separate people. Most times the president of the board will sign the contract and the director will sign as a witness, or the director will sign as a contractor and the witness can be somebody else in the same room, but they have to be separate people. The nonprofit and for-profit agencies are required to upload certificate of insurance or confirmation of coverage for both the automobiles and general liability or premises. Usually I've been putting just one attachment link on there by your signature spot, and you can run those, those papers in as one document and upload it together. If both documents are not attached, then it gets sent back to you from me before I pass it on to get that added to it. One thing that we ran across recently is that an agency actually was a step ahead and gave an insurance certificate that was dated ahead of what she signed. So if she would have signed it today, it was like the insurance was effective next Monday. So legal caught that, and I backtracked and I found an old insurance policy that was within the signing date of it. So it's very important to have the confirmation of coverage or the general liability or the certificate of insurance or the confirmation of coverage for both put up there. Now for the certs and assurances, this form is located under certifications in Black Cat. And what we like people to do is to actually check the top box that says the applicant certifies to the applicable provisions of categories 01 through 21. This way it covers everything, and you won't have to worry about losing any of the grant money. You'll be able to use it for what it's intended for. Coming up here in probably the next couple weeks, every agency is going to get an individual email for any updates that might be needed to their website, information on the transit portal for your services that you give in the counties that you give it in. I request that you make the changes directly on the form that's attached to it. It makes it easier to know exactly what needs to be deleted or needs to be added to it. Are there any questions?
Okay, everybody is really quiet today. There's just been a few other comments that have been brought up or questions in the chat box, and we'll just hold those until the end. But do keep putting comments in there or questions. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to visit a little bit about the 3 to 5 year plan. We do require that you have some type of a multi-year financial plan that includes your costs and revenues for your operating and capital purchases. And this is a requirement for applying for any of our federal grants. The last time we rolled out and discussed 3 to 5 year plans at length was in 2016. And if you put 5 years onto that, most of your plans expired in 2021. So when you applied for federal year 22 funds, many of you had expired plans. But because we do think the world of most of you, we did let it slide, but you do need to go in and visit your plans. We aren't dictating how many years out. I know a lot of the urban programs go out as far as 15 years, but at a minimum, we want you to look at forecasting out 3 to 5 years. This is a very good tool for all transit systems. It helps you anticipate where your costs are going to be, and that way you can apply for your funding accordingly. So when you do your grant applications out, you just pull out that 3 to 5 year plan and there's your budgets. And it also helps you anticipate where you're going to need local funds. Okay, next slide. So we weren't real instructive when we first required 3 to 5 year plans. So we're going to give you some stronger advice now what we would like to see. And we would like both narrative and quantitative parts of a plan. The narrative part, I mean, it's up to you because this is your plan to help you run a more efficient agency. But a little bit of your background of your services, where you go, when, maybe your mission of your organization, and then of course the important part is what's upcoming in these next 3 to 5 years. Are you going to expand your services or start new programs that you'd want to include and talk about? Are you planning on expanding your fleet for whatever reason? Are you planning to increase or reduce staffing levels based on any changes you're anticipating? What vehicles or equipment need replacement? So you would want to list those and then give an assumption as to why. Are you just going to maintain your service, but you want to incorporate cost of living increases? That's fine. Maybe you have some vehicles that are going to age out according to useful life. So you will say in these years, these vehicles will be meeting useful life. It doesn't mean you have to replace them at that time, but when that year comes up and you see that you've maintained them with preventative maintenance, they can go a little longer, then you would revise your plan. Maybe you have some vendor contracts, like with Route Match, it's be terminating, and maybe you are going to renew, but with a new company where the costs will be less. These are all type of things you would want to narratively put into the plan. Next slide, please. So in the quantitative part, you want to look at your expenses and revenues. So naturally, you'll have your current expenses. So we just want you to look at that. Is it still relevant? And then estimate out future years. Now, some of the things that could affect your expenses, of course, historically, this year will be a good example where you wouldn't want to use history because expenses could have changed based on COVID. So that's why you might want to go back the year before or before that. Take into account your economy. Maybe you have a John Deere factory that you provide a lot of transportation to rides for employees is closing. So that's something that could affect your budget. Fuel prices going up, going down, both ways. We want you to revise so it's relevant. If you're adding to your fleet, maybe your insurance costs will go up. Changes in population comes to mind, like the Wild Rose and Williston area where they had the oil boom. They need to anticipate how the losses or increases in population may affect their budget. Again, overall inflation, some years you might maintain at an easy 3%, but if inflation gets high, again, go in and revise your budgets to affect a stronger increase in inflation. Plans to increase or decrease your services. Maybe you are going to add weekend services, so your expenses will go up for driver's salaries, fuel expenses. Maybe your fleet is aging. You don't have enough local match to buy new fleet, so you're going to have to put it in more into maintaining the aging fleet. These are just examples, but maybe you are having employee retainage problems. So to stay competitive with your labor market, you've decided to pay your employees benefits such as vacation or paid holidays, whatever it may be. Those are just some things that you would increase your expense. Other things to consider in your revenue, of course, we have the things that we do every year. You have fair income, you have grants, 5311, you have state aid, you have your tax revenues, you may have advertising revenue. But things that you might want to consider that may be different is maybe they're going to implement a new sales tax. Maybe you would be so lucky in Grand Forks that they're going to have a mill levy that's going to just go to transportation. Loss of contracted services. Maybe you've always given rides to a particular nursing home who has chosen now to buy their own vehicles and won't use your service any longer. Factor that in. Anticipated loss of major donations or grant awards. For example, maybe you've been getting money from Lutheran Social Services. Now we all know they went bankrupt, so you would have to find other means then for that loss of that donation. Major fundraising campaigns. This would be more indicative of things you may need to do. And then if you're going to change your fare, this would be something that may impact your revenue too. It may increase it, it may decrease it, but that is something you have to analyze to see how it's going to affect your fare revenue. Next slide. Thank you to Standing Rock Public Transportation. Here is a picture of your fleet, all lined up and nice and clean. But one of the things we do want to also take into consideration is capital expenses, replacement or expansion vehicles, major equipment, facilities. Now, this is where we want you to anticipate if you know, say your building's going to need a new roof and you might get 3 more years out of it. Plan it into your 3 to 5 year plan. And like I mentioned earlier, even though you put in 3 years, you're going to replace 10 vehicles, budget it out by the years. Don't just put it all in the first year, but the year that they're going to meet useful life is when you'd want to include it in that plan. Next slide. Then put it into somewhat of a budget form. Here's where we want the quantitative data. You can use whatever form you use or works for your agency. The example I'm showing you just happens to be the one that we use in Black Hat, and I know you're all familiar with it because you fill it out quarterly. And then instead of doing it by quarters, you can manipulate this report and change it to the years. And then don't forget to add in revenue and capital purchases because that is not part of our normal quarterly plan. Thank you, Renee Price. I just happened to take yours because this is one you use and it's worked well for us when we as a state want to look ahead at capital purchases. And that's what she did. She took each of the years, forecasted them out. You can manipulate these how you want, but the way Renee chose to do it is she put her capital expenses first, and then she followed with operating and admin, and then she included her revenue. So whatever you would have, she had 5311 state aid, local match, and you could be more detailed on the local match if you want. This is coming from advertising, this is coming from donations, this is coming from fundraising, mill levy, whatever maybe, and then included the fares. Now, Renee, I will just say I manipulated this because I wanted it to look like you needed more funds, that your expenses would have put you in the red. So this is not true. I apologize in advance. But then at the bottom, you can see where she put in a balance. And that would be a nice indication to you that, oh, we're going to need this amount of money this year because we're buying 2 vehicles. We better get to the county council commission meeting and ask for more money, or we need to do a major fundraising spaghetti feed, or anyway, it's not going to be last minute for you. It's going to give you time to plan ahead, and it'll be help you with a much more efficient means of managing your business. Plus, when we look at it, we can anticipate where there is going to be large capital requests as well. And then when you get your board to approve it, obviously, we want you to put it into a Black Hat resources. Then as you review it, just drop off the left column and add a new column for future years on the right. Okay, I don't know, do I have another slide? No, I don't. So that's a little helpful hints on 3 to 5 year plans, how it'll help you and how it'll help us. If you have any questions, either put it in the chat room or open your mic. Thank you.
Okay, Sally, I saw, hopefully the slides are changing now for you. I saw you put a comment in the chat. The next thing we're going to talk about is I just wanted to just go over a recap of our state bids we have for vehicles. As you know, the recent one that we've been waiting on is for the 88 transit van, and this in the past was just a rear lift van, but this year we put it out for bids for a rear and a side lift. Those bids closed on February 10th. We did receive 6 bids, and they're being reviewed right now by myself and state procurement. So hopefully we will have a decision soon. I meet with him later today. And then once it's been awarded, there's a 7-day protest period. And then if there are no protests, then we can award after that. So you're looking at potentially, if everything goes good, possibly another week to week and a half before you can bid off of for any of these rear or side lifts. And then going through, I'm not going to go through and read each one of these, but I just wanted everyone to know that these are the state bids we have out there, and they are under on our state bids for our cutaway, then our ADA transit vans. This is the I'm sorry, the one on the bottom, the 301B, that is the rear lift ADA transit vehicle that's only a medium roof one. So that's one's a little bit different, and it was done separately from our original one. So next slide. The next ones we have here, we have our front runner, which is the New England Wheels. And then ADA low floor minivan is now the Dodge Voyager. And then we have our low floor paratransit Arbach. And here too, you can go and look. I've listed the expiration dates and if there's an extension or no extension on it and who the current vendors are. Next slide. Does anybody have any questions on that before we go right into the next one? Okay, Julie, you're up.
I didn't have my mic on. I apologize. I just want to go over a couple different civil rights changes that we need to make you guys aware of. We are required under DBE to report any transit vehicle manufacturing purchases, which means any vehicles that you purchase. In the past, we were reporting these purchases at the time that you claimed reimbursement for them. We found out we were doing that incorrectly. The TVM reporting is required to be done at the time you contract to purchase the vehicle. Some of you who have already requested permission for purchasing vehicles are wondering why we need that contract purchase invoice up front. And it's because we have 30 days from the time that you enter into a contract with someone to purchase a vehicle. So if you're emailing Becky for approval to purchase a vehicle, just know that you will need to get that contract invoice from the vendor that you're buying that from and get that to us within that time frame so that we can report that accurately to FTA. As I said, we had been doing it incorrectly in the past, and this was brought to our attention, and that we have now fixed our process. Another thing I want to make everyone aware of is under your public participation, which is part of your Title VI plan. I just want you all to note that one of the requirements that's out in the circular for Title VI reporting is your outreach. So any outreach that you guys perform from the time that this last plan started until the next submittal, which will happen in 2 years now because you all redid them last year, you need to also report all outreach activities that you perform within the last period of your plan as part of your plan. So perform your outreach, do whatever activities that you do, document them, and they will need to be included in your next Title VI plan when it is submitted. So I guess I just can't stress enough that that's one of the things that FTA is looking at when they look at their plans. It was one of the things that they noted when they reviewed our plan, that we needed to report that activity that happens on not only ours, but how we collect that from the subrecipients. So that will be a requirement. Okay. Questions on that?
There is a question in the box, Julie.
Okay, I'm looking, hang on.
From Brian.
And it's not coming up, why?
You just want me to ask you, Julie?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
So you're talking about getting an invoice. Generally, you don't get an invoice till you actually have the item in hand that you purchased. So how?
It's the order. It's the
Go ahead.
order invoice that you get from the vendor.
We don't get an order invoice from the vendor. I have a purchase order. Are you talking about a purchase
Yep.
order?
Mhm.
Okay, then we probably need to clarify that we're talking about a purchase order, because an invoice is what you get when you actually receive the vehicle that you pay off of, and people aren't going to get that.
Yeah, different vendors call it different things, but it's basically your purchase order when you sign the contract to purchase the vehicle, where they give you your cost, how much it's going to cost,
Right.
and
all,
broken out.
Yep.
That is what we need to report. I need to report to FTA under the TVM reporting.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, Brian.
And Sally also asked, do vendors know about the vendor invoice? And I guess my answer to that is, I guess you guys have always this is Becky, you guys have always messaged me, emailed me, and asked for approval to order. And I give you approval to order, and I assume that in your conversations with the vendors that you not only discuss the state bid, but they give you a document so you can look at everything out there and make sure that you have all of your options and everything you want in a purchase order of that vehicle before you say, okay, I want to order. And I guess that's what I always assumed. So if that's not the case, I think that I would be sure going in the future, because we will need that. And you should have that too.
To guarantee all your options and everything is included, there should be some document to document that, yes.
Okay. Then moving on, we have a bunch of just other topics that just wanted to bring up. I know that starting this year, we had made it a requirement that we had on file your actual SAM.gov registration. In the past, you always signed and certified that you did have a SAM.gov account, but now we needed to make sure, and going forward, annually, you will need to be sure that we have an updated copy of your active status in SAM.gov. And this would all be different for everybody, because everybody is different as far as when they were approved in SAM.gov. So just so you know, we will be monitoring that, but we really put it on you to be responsible to send us and update when they send you a notification to say your registration is expiring. Because if we do not have an active registration, we can't pay you on any contract or write you a new contract. And then also our state management plan for public transportation is now been updated, and it is available on our website. So be sure and go and check that out. It was out there in December for comment, and we did not receive any comments. So the other thing that we have coming up for us at DOT is we have our virtual state management review with FTA and the consultant, and that will be held on April 20th. And there were 2 agencies that were selected as to be reviewed virtually, and that is Walsh County and Nutrition United, who both, thank you both, we appreciate it. This year being virtual will be a new experience. We've already supplied all the information on these 2 agencies that have been requested to the consultants and FTA, and the agencies will only be contacted if they need additional information. So there won't be any meetings where they discuss anything with the 2 agencies. So that's a little bit different for us and for the agencies, where in the past they were on site and looked around at their facility and looked at a few vehicles and had some general conversation and questions. But that's no longer the case now that we have a virtual review. And the only other item that I added for our meeting today was just our DTA conference that's coming up in Fargo in September. And I did ask a member of DTA to talk about the upcoming conference. I believe Brian was selected to talk about this.
You know, I got informed that Carrie was selected, but we've been sitting here going back and forth, and she's telling me she just plain wasn't going to do it. So I tried to throw Aaron, our other North Dakota delegate, under the bus, but that didn't work either. So yeah, here I am. Yeah, we're really, we just had a board meeting last week. As a matter of fact, we're well on our way to planning the conference in Fargo. It should be really good, I think. It's going to be at the Delta Marriott, I believe it's called. The conference and the rodeo will be all right there at that facility, so that's always nice. We are just now trying to confirm some speakers and some sessions. Some of the things we're looking at that we pretty much narrowed it down to off of a lot of last year's comments were some security items. So we're looking at doing some security training for the drivers on Sunday, as well as another driver station training like we did last year on Saturday during the rodeo. We're looking at some fare collection techniques. Scott Bogren from CPAA, we're going to try to have him come in for a session. We are looking at marketing, which was another big one that was asked for. And then we're going to have a panel from South Dakota DOT and a few of the agencies in South Dakota that have recently gone through all their consolidation. That was also brought up as a suggestion for this year to see how that all went and what that all entailed. So if you've got any comments or thoughts or ideas, please let one of the board members know, and we hope to see you all in Fargo. It should be a really good conference.
Thank you. Now, does anybody else have any comments or anything that they wanted to bring up before we go back to the questions in the chat? And you can just either unmute yourself or type in the chat box. Okay, going back to the chat box, the question was asked, does someone have a policy that we can use, or are we all on our own, or are on our, so we're all on the same page, I'm sorry. And that goes back to the safety mask mandate requirement.
There's not a policy developed, but if you go out and look at that safety directive, they have some very good guidelines there. That I'm aware of. FTA has not done any type of a draft policy on that.
But if somebody else in the transit world has a policy that they would like to share with everybody, you can definitely either send that directly to Susan at Benson County, or send it to the DOT and we can distribute it. And Brian has a question.
No, just to comment along that line. So we made one here, and what I found to be the easiest, just basically mimic the CDC guidelines. The CDC recommendation that came out along with the presidential executive order and all that, it's all laid out right there. I just basically cut and pasted everything from that and said, this is our policy, plain and simple. And then I attached all that to our webpage. If you want to go out and take a peek at that, we have links to the executive order from the president. We have links to the CDC guidelines, all that kind of stuff out there. So it's pretty easy, just plagiarized everything they wrote.
Yep, and on that just along with Brian, that safety directive had a very good outline, so to speak, and gave examples of what you can do. Gave examples of different exemptions, different circumstances, and what you need to do. And that security directive is the one on what I had the tab, the slide that had the 3 websites on it. So it's on there, and it gives good information. Just like Brian said, that's pretty much laid out.
Okay, thank you. The other question was, can drivers remove their masks when they are in the vehicles by themselves? And actually, Brian from City of Minot answered this question for us. and said, yes, they can. And that is absolutely true. They can.
As long as they are alone in the vehicle.
Yeah.
There was one other caveat that came out yesterday in the meeting and in the stakeholder phone call. And the question that was asked is whether maintenance employees need to wear the masks on transit and within the transit facility. And the directive that came out on that call yesterday was that all employees needed to wear a mask in a public facility, including the maintenance employees, unless they were in a private office. So if you have a private office, you don't have to wear your mask within your office. But if you're outside of your office, the directive that came on that phone call was that you do.
Okay, and Jordan, go ahead.
So Julie, when you say public building, our maintenance building isn't open to the public. Is that what you mean, or is it just publicly owned buildings?
It says all transit facilities, and the specific question was on the maintenance was if the mechanics and the maintenance personnel had to wear a mask, and the answer that they gave on that call yesterday was they did.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, any other questions for us before we wrap up here?
So Brian's hand is still up. Did he have another question, or did he just not take his hand down?
Nope, I guess I'm just not smart enough to figure out how to put my hand back down.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody for coming on today. I guess we took the whole time. I didn't know that we'd have enough information or questions or discussion to go the whole time, but I do appreciate it. If you have any other questions, definitely don't hesitate to contact any of us in transit or any other discussion items. We'd love to hear from you. So that's all we have. Thank you so much. Stay warm.
Thank you.